I don't think anyone was really surprised when Hogan came out to start Slammiversary, but he didn't do that much. He just welcomed everyone to the show and announced that he called an audible and Joe versus Aries was going to be for the X Division title, even though Samoa Joe is clearly over the weight limit. At least I think that's what he said. It was a little unclear, but the title was going to be on the line. Hogan gets out of the ring and we're off and running. X Division title match, Austin Aries versus Samoa Joe. Rematch, rematch, rematch. It's been a while since we saw this Samoa Joe. I know for the last couple of years he hasn't looked incredibly motivated, and who could blame him really, but he has seemed like he's been having more fun recently. We saw hints of it when he was teaming with Magnus, and hopefully that's not done yet, but this was Joe's best singles match in a long time. Terrific stuff in this one, some great spots, the crucifix, the 450, the brainbuster that looked like it broke Joe's neck. Damn, I wish they gave this more time, because this was hashtag great, it really was. And it's a real shame that this was thrown together so late, because this deserved so much more build-up than it got. But as it was, a tremendous match, and it got the show off to a hot start. And how did TNA choose to follow up this awesome opener? With a completely random, unhyped, unannounced match between two guys who haven't been on TV in months.
What?
Cash and Hernandez? Cash and Hernandez? Where the hell did that match come from?
What?
I know, I'm confused too.
What?
Stop that! It was a pretty good match. Cash brought his A game and Hernandez managed to not cause any injuries, but there was no story behind it. I have no idea why it was there. What do you want me to say here? It was enjoyable, but it didn't belong on a Slammiversary card. Speaking of things that didn't belong on a Slammiversary card, Devon and Garrett Bischoff versus the Robbies. God bless that live audience. Garrett and Robbie E are squaring off in the ring, and what do we hear from the crowd? You can't wrestle! You can't wrestle! Thank you, Texas wrestling fans.
You're welcome!
What? I got nothing. This feud has been so pointless and so boring, I have nothing to say. Robbie eats the pin, again.
Yes!
So the team with Devon, the only guy in this match the audience gave a rat's ass about, wins. Thank God. Then him and Garrett danced like jackasses for some reason.
Somebody call my mama!
Not sure what that's about. Nor do I care. Moving on. Number 1 contendership match, Anderson, Hardy, and Van Dam. This was a good match. Really good. But there was never really anything more to it than that. It was thrown together on the go-home show just to get these guys pay-per-view spots, all in an effort to hype a TV match, and that's really it. In that capacity, it was a success. It was a fun match. I thought the finish with the Rolling Thunder into the mic check was cool. I don't really have much else. Then we had the Crimson Open Challenge, which was answered by James Storm. I had mixed feelings about this one. On the one hand, I don't agree with them ending Crimson's streak. It was finally getting over, he was starting to make some real traction as a heel, and they ended it right when they were figuring out how to make it work. But if they were going to end it, they picked the right way to do it and the right guy to do it. I mean, can you think of a better way to put over the return of James Storm? That was perfect. It brings him back with a bang. It's a great jumping off point for him when they start the Bound for Glory series. Really glad they're bringing that back. I don't really agree with the streak ending, but at least they did it the right way. So, there you go. Knockouts title match, Gail Kim versus Miss Tessmacher, because apparently having two Brooks on the show would just be confusing. I think their sacrifice match was probably better than this one, but I still think this was pretty good, minus that one unfortunate botch. But what we had here was a textbook example of how a veteran should be used when it comes to making new stars. Gail Kim was a dominant champion, held the title for ages, longer than anyone's held it, ran through all the knockout stalwarts, or at least all the ones that mean anything in this new creative regime, and then when the time was right, she dropped the title, putting over a rising young star that would benefit a lot from the rub that came from beating the longest reigning knockouts champion of all time. As a result, Tessmacher looks like a real star now. I think this was perfect. It was the right time to end Gail's run with the belt, since she'd done pretty much everything with it that she could, and they picked the right person to beat her, in my opinion, because if it had been Mickey or Tara or ODB or someone like that, the rub of beating Gail would have been wasted. They've already been to the top, but this was an accolade that'll really do a lot for Tessmacher. She was in a position to get the most out of that rub, so I think this was a great move. But if this is going to be effective, Tessmacher needs to hold the title for a while. If she loses it after a few weeks in her first title defense, she'll just get written off as a fluke champion like Velvet Sky was. She should stay the champion at least until Bound for Glory to really prove that she's legit. Now, if her title reign sucks, then so be it, but I think she's got a good chance of making something out of this. To review Bully Ray versus Joseph Park as a wrestling match would be unfair. This wasn't a wrestling match, this was an angle, just like Cena versus Laurinaitis was an angle. So, as an angle, how did it rate? Well, I didn't have any misconceptions about it. It was about what I expected. The performances were what made it work. Bully Ray is a master of drawing heat, the Joseph Park character has gotten over in a short time, and he played his role perfectly as a guy who was just completely out of his element. It didn't really feel like something that belonged on Slammiversary, but for 15 or so minutes I was entertained, and that's all I was hoping for. Granted, I'm still not entirely sure what the point of this storyline is, but it was a fun segment and I enjoyed it. Tag team title match, AJ Styles and Kurt Angle versus Christopher Daniels and Kazarian. Damn. This was awesome. This was up there with the Machine Guns versus Beer Money. I don't know if it was as good as that, but it was close. Really, really great match. The only problem was the storyline did them a disservice because it was completely disconnected from everything that happened. This whole thing with Daniels and Kaz revealing the AJ Dixie Carter situation has been about pretty much everything except the tag titles. I really don't see how one affects the other, but still a fantastic match. Unfortunately, this is where the show peaked. Now, I haven't talked about the Sting stuff yet. There's a reason for that. The Sting is the first inductee into the TNA Hall of Fame. Now, off the top of my head, I can think of a bunch of people who should have been inducted before Sting, and I'm sure you can too. Yeah, he deserves to be in there eventually, but didn't Sting himself say that he shouldn't be inducted first? I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere. I had a whole big rant that I was going to go on here, but I'm not going to do that because of what happened later. Christian Cage showed up. Really cool to see him back for one night, even though he obviously didn't want to be there. But what do you have him do? Introduce the #1 biggest moment in TNA history, the debut of Sting. Really? Not saying he hasn't done a lot for the company, but that was the biggest moment in the history of TNA? Bigger than the debut of Kurt Angle, bigger than the debut on Spike TV, bigger than the first weekly pay-per-view? Really? Really?
Really?
I'm not saying this didn't bug me. It did. But again, I'm not going to make a big stink about it. Why? Because they were working an angle here. I'm saying all this was part of an angle. Because after all that build-up, after these huge accolades they gave Sting, after they made it look like it was going to be Sting's big night, his big moment of glory to win back the world title for the umpteenth time, after all that, Bobby Roode beating him meant so much more. Because now, Bobby Roode is the guy that ruined Sting's big night, and that trumps everything else. Unfortunately, it was really hurt by the fact that they didn't go nearly as far with it as they should have. The match itself was, frankly, pretty boring. Bobby Roode was on the defensive for most of it. It didn't really get out of first gear, to the point where the crowd didn't even react that much to the finish because it was just really underwhelming. I did like the beer bottle, because with Storm back now, that's perfect foreshadowing, but this needed to be a complete decimation. They should have had Bobby Roode go in there and tear Sting to shreds. It would have been the ultimate slap in the face, and the best way possible to push Bobby Roode to mega heel status. I assume the ultimate goal in all this is to vindicate James Storm at Bound for Glory. Well, that starts by making Bobby Roode look like a monster, not a guy who gets his ass kicked for 15 minutes, wins with a beer bottle to the head, then gets his ass kicked after the match and gets put through a table. That doesn't make me anxious to see Storm versus Roode.
You people are fools!
Roode won the match, but just like at Victory Road, if he doesn't look strong in the process, the win really doesn't mean that much. And I don't blame Sting for this. Sting proved in WCW that he was willing to put over the young stars. The problem is that TNA are completely wrong-headed about this guy. They protect him so much that it becomes detrimental to everything else. Bobby Roode now has 2 wins over Sting. And both times he got his ass kicked only to win in fluky fashion and weasel away with the belt by the skin of his teeth when he needed to be dominant in order to be put over the right way. That would make Roode a bigger star, and it would make James Storm eventually beating him mean a lot more because he beat the guy who destroyed Sting. But now he's going to beat the guy who got his ass kicked by Sting. And there's a lot less interest in that.
This is ridiculous, man, any way you look at it.
There's a real issue here with TNA putting Sting on a pedestal. So much so that even when he does put someone over, it's not done in a way that's as effective as it should be. I'm not saying Sting isn't a legend. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve a lot of respect. But there comes a point where it's just too damn much. Slammiversary was a really good pay-per-view. I thoroughly enjoyed it. There was some filler stuff that didn't need to be there, but there were some good matches, 2 great matches, some entertaining stuff with Joseph Park and Bully Ray. The Sting thing continues to be an issue, but that's a stumbling block. At least their heads are in the right place. James Storm still seems to be the goal, and as long as they stick to that plan, this should work out for the best ultimately. That's all for the pay-per-view. Stick around for the Impact review coming up right after the intro. Stay tuned. So on the heels of a really strong pay-per-view, TNA decided to kick Impact Wrestling off this week with an Ultimate X match. Now since they moved to the new time slot, Q1 has been tanking. So they're trying to load up that first segment as much as they can. Unfortunately, that doesn't really work if you don't advertise something like this. Yeah, they made an announcement on Twitter about it on, I think, Wednesday night. And that was the only promotion I saw for it. Now, putting a big match on the show might entice viewers to watch if it's presented right. But if they don't even know the match is happening, it kind of defeats the purpose. TNA should have announced this match last week, or at least on the pay-per-view, and made a big deal out of it. But they proved on this show that they've got it in their heads now that they need to hype stuff up in advance. So I would bet good money that the decision to book this was made at most 36 hours before the show aired. Which doesn't exactly fill me with confidence in their creative process, but there you go. It was Austin Aries, Chris Sabin, and Zema Ion for the X Division title. Sadly, it's not really fair to critique this one. The match was going just fine, but then Sabin got injured again, which changed everything, so there's no telling how it was booked or how much time was allotted to it originally. But man, Sabin tore his other ACL, and he just came back from an ACL injury. You really have to feel for that guy. I'm so upset about this. Chris Sabin is my favorite wrestler, you guys know that. And I'm getting really concerned for his career now. It breaks my heart to see him go down with another injury like this. It kills me. But the show must go on. So Austin Aries wins, then he gets on the mic, and following up the promo he cut at the pay-per-view, he says he's not content to be where he is, he wants to be the main event, and he thinks he deserves to be the main event, and this brings out Hulk Hogan. Hogan starts by putting himself over, but then he seemed to remember what he was supposed to be doing. He actually put over Austin Aries as one of the best guys he's ever seen, as a guy who gives him goosebumps, and this is the best part, he says he'll give Austin Aries a shot at Bobby Roode at Destination X. Austin Aries gets a world title shot?
What?
Austin Aries headlining a pay-per-view?
What?
Well, I've got just one thing to say to that.
Yes! 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 Yes!
The one catch is that in order to get this match, Aries would have to vacate the X Division title, because for some reason Hogan says he can't be the champion of 2 divisions at once. Wasn't Gail Kim the champion of 2 divisions at once just a few months ago? Why was it okay for her but not for Aries? They set up Aries giving Hogan his decision next week. Of course he's going to go for it, because they're already airing those promos on the YouTube page, which means my prediction of Aries versus AJ Styles at Destination X won't be happening, though I do think we'll get that match at some point. But Aries versus Roode for the world title? Oh, hell yeah. I don't know how I feel about him vacating the X Division title, though. On the one hand, it gets Aries out of jobbing to someone and maybe hurting his momentum, but at the same time, you're really throwing away a huge rub you could give to someone by having them take the title from Aries. And look what a rub like that did for Tessmacher. So there's positives and negatives to consider here, but I'm not going to complain about Austin Aries getting a world title shot. That is fucking awesome. Also awesome. Devon finally defended the TV title against someone who is not Robbie E.
Yes! 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 Yes!
Unfortunately, that someone was Hernandez.
No! No! No!
Thankfully, Devon won. The match wasn't bad, but Hernandez is as reckless as always. He's never really learned how to work safely in the ring, and it's probably just a matter of time before he injures someone again, so I'm really hoping this was just a one-off match. Hernandez has looked alright in his 2 appearances since he came back, but I have no desire to see him getting singles title shots.
This alleged superstar is an unworthy opponent.
The Bound for Glory series is back, and according to the website, they've tweaked the rules so each competitor will get an equal number of matches now. That's good. It ought to make more sense this time. They had a gauntlet battle royal for the first 20 points in the tournament, and here we found out all the guys that are going to be in this. It'll be Samoa Joe, Bully Ray, Mr. Anderson, Magnus, good, Kurt Angle, AJ Styles, so apparently they can be champions of 2 divisions at once, but Aries can't. I don't know why. Bob Van Dam, the Pope, who I hope is out of the doghouse finally, Jeff Hardy, Christopher Daniels, James Storm, and last and most certainly least, Robbie E.
Clearly, one of these superstars is not like the others.
So the guy who has done absolutely nothing except get squashed by Devon over and over again for months, who hasn't won a match in I don't know how long, is in the Bound for Glory series. Meanwhile, Gunner, who was in the Final Four last year, is nowhere to be seen, and Crimson, the guy who was at the top of the leaderboard until he was taken out of last year's Bound for Glory series and has lost only 1 match since then, is not included either.
Oh, what a bunch of bull.
Yeah, they were booked for the house show in Texas that night, but from a booking standpoint, how in the blue hell does this make any kind of sense? The only thing I can come up with is that Robbie is going to be the designated jobber in the tournament and just be there to put over the talented people. Because you can't have everyone scoring wins all the time. Someone's going to have to come in dead last on the leaderboard. And Samoa Joe did make him look like a complete buffoon here. That's the only explanation I've got.
Therefore, I cannot and will not demean myself by engaging this ignoramus this evening.
Really interesting booking here in that, guys like Jeff Hardy, Bob Van Dam, the established guys that you'd think would be the favorites to win were all taken out early. In fact, the last 3 guys in there were Joe, Storm, and Daniels. I like that. James Storm wins, just as he should have. He cuts an awesome promo on Bobby Roode, and that match by all rights should be epic when it happens. And yeah, the whole tournament is just a formality. Of course it's going to be Storm versus Roode at Bound for Glory. We all know that. It is predictable, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It doesn't mean the journey getting there can't be compelling. And James Storm can make pretty much anything compelling, so Robbie E just needs to get the fuck out of there, but damn it, this segment was awesome just because of James Storm. Tessmacher had her first match as the Knockouts champion against Madison Rayne. It was pretty short. I think it went about 3 minutes. Obviously not as good as the match with Gail. Tessmacher has improved a lot, but she's still at a point where she benefits from working with a ring general who can bring out the best in her, and that ain't Madison Rayne. So the match wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. It was decent. A good enhancement match for Tessmacher, and that's all it really needed to be. Also, there was a pre-tape with Gail Kim and Brooke Hogan where Gail wants a rematch with Tessmacher, but Brooke says she's not going to get it right away, and she won't be in the title match next week either, so they're not off to a good start. I actually like that decision. Gail was in the spotlight for a long time, so I think it would be a good idea to just give that character a break for a little bit, let Tessmacher shine on her own for a while, and then maybe do the rematch at Bound for Glory in a few months. And once again, this was the only time we saw Brooke Hogan all night. She was there for a quick segment, she made a match, pushed a storyline, and that was it. I can't believe I'm saying this, but a couple weeks into the Brooke Hogan thing, and I really can't complain about how they've used her. She hasn't been there to put herself before all the knockouts like Karen was. So far, it's been painless. Who knew? The main event was Ken Anderson getting his world title shot against Bobby Roode that he won at the pay-per-view. I have no complaints about this. It was a good match, it got good time. Roode submits Anderson, winning the match clean. That's what should have happened at the pay-per-view, damn it! So Roode can beat Anderson clean, but he has to be Sting's bitch time and time again? Oh, for God's sake. Look, the booking was great here. Let's just try to forget about the Sting thing. Final segment of the night. Sting comes out. He He talks about what an honor it was to be the first inductee into the Hall of Fame, but he says that there were other guys who maybe deserved it more than he did. And no sooner does he name drop Jeff Jarrett than 3 masked men jump him from behind and lay him out. So it doesn't take a genius to see what they're hinting at there.
Destination? Horror.
The thought of a Sting Jeff Jarrett feud just makes me really bored and tired. But if they're not going to be putting over young talent effectively, and Double J has proven many times that he really doesn't like doing that, I guess feuding them against each other means no young stars get damaged by them at least. Doesn't mean I want to see it though. You know what? This was a great show. The best Impact in at least a couple months. Good wrestling, promos, booking, clean match finishes. The Sabin injury kills me, and Robbie E just needs to just get that loser out of there. But all told, there was a lot to be positive about this week. And another thing, I'm hoping this is a sign that TNA might have finally learned this lesson. They went out of their way to stack next week's show. They announced a lot of stuff. There's Austin Aries' decision, the AJ Dixie reveal, the 4-way Knockouts title match, plus the gut check. And I don't know about you guys, but I look forward to that every month. I expect this one will be Taylor Hendricks from OVW. She uploaded a YouTube video about that Thursday night. She took it down pretty quickly, but the intention was clear, so I'm guessing it'll be her. So there's a lot of stuff lined up for next week, which, if nothing else, shows TNA is committed to making this open fight night concept work. So I'm actually pretty hyped up for that show. Unfortunately, I won't be able to watch it live because I'll be working that night. So yeah, that's all I got. If you missed Impact, find it somewhere. This was a pretty damn good episode. Until next week, over, out.